Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We are in Parashat Lech, Lecha, most known for the opening verse that Abraham is given the call, right? To go forth, to set out, to go somewhere. And lots of rabbinic commentary on that. We don't generally spend very much time on what we're going to read today. Most of us skip it when we're dealing with the stories of the patriarchs. So we'll look a little bit at this different picture of Abraham, and then we'll close with the covenantal interestingness that happens in chapter 15. But I want first to recap where we've been, because it is relevant to this parsha. We started at Bereshit. We started at Genesis. So we get this setting. We get the setting. If you're going to tell the story, you need to put the stage, the curtains, everything in place. You need the scenery. The creation narrative is not an attempt to explain how the world came to be. That is not the purpose of the creation narrative as we have it. The purpose is to set the stage. So we get the setting, and in that we get a little bit of discussion about that it's the one God that creates it. That's important, right? That's an Israelite innovation. That one force in this universe is a concentration of all the different forces that had been assigned to other gods and goddesses in the pagan world surrounding ancient Israel. So the Israelite innovation is that there's one force that contains all those other forces. Okay, so that, of course, is discussed in Bereshit. Then we get Noach. We get the flood. Every ancient Near Eastern people has a flood narrative. You have to have the flood narrative because there's a flood. So you got to have the story about the flood. So we get our flood narrative. You can compare it directly to the Sumerian and Akkadian and Ugaritic stories. Very, very similar, with a different Israelite message, of course. So that ends with what? What happens with Noach? What happens at the end of the flood narrative?
They repopulate the earth.
They repopulate the earth, and what happens?
A covenant.
A covenant. Who is the covenant made between?
God and humanity.
God and humanity. And what did we discuss last week?
God and the earth.
Lovely. So God, humanity, all living things, and the earth. Not generally how we tend to think of covenant, right? All right, so that was last week. This week, so you start to see the trajectory. This week, we are getting another discussion of a covenant. We are getting the introduction of a specific family. Noach is representative of all humanity. The covenant, the original covenant that is still in place, by the way, is with all of humanity, all living things, and the planet. And we have this other business. We have a particular family that now is going to get introduced, and this, of course, becomes the story of the patriarchs and the matriarchs from whom we mythically descend. So going from the cosmos to humanity, right, and living things after the flood, narrowing it further to Abraham. And at this point, he's Avram. Yes? Abram. He's Avram, and he is married to? Sarai. All right. So Sarai, princess. A pedimento, probably, of lots of goddess stuff in the pre-Israelite literature that comes together in Sarai as the matriarch. All right, so we are used to Lech Lecha. We're used to this idea that Avram is called to leave and to leave his family, but where they've been, but we forget that his whole family was on the move to begin with. His entire family, we're not told why. Terach, his father, we're told that they are on their way, they're emigrating, and they stop at Haran and settle in Haran. We're not told why they're emigrating, but they're already on the move, which we also tend to forget. We tend to think of Abraham having grown up in the same place where all of his grandparents and great-grandparents came from, and he's the one who leaves, when in fact his whole family is on the move.
Well, was that typical of the time, more nomadic rather than...
So, it's an excellent point. It's an excellent question. It depends. If you're talking about a semi-nomadic pastoralist culture, yes, they would have moved, but they would have cycled through the same places. You grazed in the winter here, you grazed in the spring there. Think of Native Americans, right? Here was the summer feeding ground, and here was the winter place. There were many settled agrarian communities as well in the Fertile Crescent. All right. So definitely we get Abraham, the semi-nomadic pastoralist. And there's tension always in Torah between settled agrarian life and semi-nomadic pastoralist life, right? There's always that push-pull in Torah. All right, so we're used to the patriarch being somebody who kind of sets out, who's in relationship to God. What we don't focus on a lot, I don't think, is this other side of Avram in his early life. He is devoted to his nephew, Lot. Devoted to his nephew. And we're going to see how devoted. And deeply devoted to his wife, Sarai, and is not generally, in our estimation, a man of war or a hero. So let's look at 14 and read this episode. That is not exactly the picture we generally get of Avram. Somebody read.
In the time of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. That was my best guess.
There you go. You're doing great. You're doing great.
These four waged war against Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shema Ber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar.
Of course.
These all joined forces at the valley of Siddim, now the Dead Sea. For 12 years they had been subject to Chedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and his allied kings came and subdued the Rephaim in Ashtaroth,
Karnaim,
the Zuzim in Ham, the Emim in Sheva Kiriataim, and the Horites in their hill country of Seir as far as El Paran by the edge of the wilderness. They then returned, coming to Ein Mishpat, that is Kadesh, where they subdued the whole country of Amalek and the Amorites who dwell in the Hazazon Tamar. Am I done yet?
No.
Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out and arrayed themselves in battle formation against the enemy in the valley of Siddim, against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar. 4 kings against 5.
All right. Have you ever heard this?
No.
Do you ever remember hearing this? We never talk about this. No. We just don't. So, so there's this. What is going on right here? So this is all the setup. This is a setup. There's a big king. Everybody's been living under the big guy. Right? And then there are vassal kings. This is the normal Canaanite city-state situation. Right? This is normal. You have the big guy, the big king, and then you have kings underneath who are vassal kings, serving the big king. There's a kingdom of 5 allies and 4 allies, and something's going to happen. What are we told? Everything seemed to be fine, and then for some reason, they're going to be kings who are rebelling. Okay. Why? We don't know. Okay. That's what they do. Lois says that's what they do. Okay. So for some reason, we're going to get in a conflict. All right. Verse 10. Nobody's going to volunteer.
Now the valley of Siddim was studded with tar pits, and when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some tumbled into them, and the rest fled to the hills. So they took all the possessions of the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah and their food and went off. And as they went off, they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, with his possessions. He was a resident of Sodom.
Okay, so what we didn't read was what happened a little bit earlier, which is that Lot is getting impatient to be successful, and there's starting to be tension. Whenever you have big flocks and they're getting huge, you have tension around who gets to use what land. And so Avram, to keep the family peace, says, Lot, we're gonna split, divide, so that we don't get into arguments, and you pick first where you want to go. Avram's the elder, Avram's the uncle. Avram should have picked first, but doesn't push it. And says, whatever you want. I'm not so interested, whatever. And Lot chooses what? Where does Lot choose to live? Dun, 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 dun. We know what's going to happen with Sodom, don't we? Bad choice. So Lot, in his greed, falls in with a bad crowd.
Which we already know earlier on, they're wicked sinners there.
Certainly, they are wicked sinners. Certainly. So Lot chooses poorly, chooses based on greed, if you will, and he's in Sodom and winds up being taken as part of this conflict that's going on. He and his possessions have now been taken. All right. 13.
A fugitive brought the news to Abram the Hebrew, who was dwelling at the terebinths of Mamre the Amorite, kinsman of Eshcol, and Aner, these being Abram's allies. When Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he mustered his retainers born into his household, numbering 318, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. At night he and his servants deployed against them and defeated them, and he pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. He brought back all the possessions. He also brought back his kinsman Lot and his possessions and the women and the rest of the people.
Go on.
When he returned from defeating Chedorlaomer and the kings with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, which is the valley of the king. And King Melchizedek of Salem brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. He blessed him, saying, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your foes into your hand. And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything.
Go on.
Then the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons and take the possessions for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I swear to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, I will not take so much as a thread or a sandal strap of what is yours. You shall not say, It is I who made Abram rich. For me, nothing but what my servants have used up. As for the share of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their share.
Okay.
That's amazing.
So this is a portrait that we don't often see. It's a period in Avram's life that we generally skip over. We generally, Lech Lecha, set out. God makes a promise. Now we have this special relationship. And then, how are we going to have a son? And we go right on to the Hagar, Sarai, big drama, family, fertility, offspring, next gen, right? We skip over this stuff about Avram as a patriarch. So Avram is a big guy. He's a big guy in the region. He's a player. He hears that Lot has been taken. If you look at the geography as it's described, Avram is living outside the region of conflict. He has no reason to get involved in this. This is not his fight, right? And in the ancient world, just like in the world today, if you go out to participate in a fight, you risk death. And you risk losing everything. If you lose, you're toast, right? You ride out to battle with everybody in your clan, and you lose, or your side loses, you're done. You're slaves. Your women, children, everybody's carried off, right? So and he went in. This is a huge deal. He hears that Lot has been taken, and he gets his folk girded, right? He has them armed, and he goes. He could have left Lot to his fate.
Amy, is this the first time that Abram is introduced as a monotheist?
Introduced as a monotheist? Say more.
Well, he pledges to God on high. Is it already understood that there is one God?
So it's important to remember, and we'll get there in a minute, but it's important to remember that he's using the same language that Melchizedek is using. Melchizedek says El Elyon. So it is not necessarily the one God that Abraham is talking about.
Because there's no predicate to this earlier than this.
So
It's just introduced.
He's using the same language that Melchizedek is using. So we're going to look at what that language is. So Avram might mean it, but it's not obvious. Like, it's not like, okay, what did he just say?
Yeah, right.
The one God. What's that? Right?
But
So
he refers to Adonai.
all right. So we have to look at the Hebrew. We have to look at the Hebrew to find out what's going on, which we're going to do. So a fugitive brings the news to, what is he called? Avram HaIvri. Abraham the Hebrew. Odd, right? So he's already known in the region as Avram HaIvri. Abraham the Hebrew, who is living Be'elonei Mamre, at the terebinths of Mamre. Also very well known in the region. You don't have to say, those trees over by the 405 before you cross the 10, right? All you have to say is the terebinths of Mamre, and everybody knows what you're talking about. So we're talking about around Hebron, right? So above Beersheba, below other stuff, right? So we're at Hebron, and he's told that his kinsman has been taken captive. He musters his retainers born in his household, numbering 318. That is a large force. He's taking everybody. 300 people he's taking, and pursues. He goes all the way to Dan. Where's Dan? Up north, right? That is a long ride. So they pursue as far as Dan, right? They are not messing around. It's not just get out. It's get out of the region, right? They've whooped them, all right? So he defeats them, and he pursues them as far as Chova, north of Damascus. He's not messing around. Don't come back, right? He brings back all the possessions. When you win, you plunder. You bring back booty, right? Half the point of war, frankly, is booty, right? So he brings it back, and brings back Lot and all of Lot's possessions. So he saves everything that Lot has. And the women, right? So nothing's been lost. And the rest of the people that were part of, right, the household. When he returns from defeating this king and his allied kings, The king of Sodom comes out to meet him in the valley. This is a big deal. Avram is the conquering hero. He is a big deal. So much so that the king of Sodom comes out to meet him. When the local king comes out to meet you, you are a big deal. King Melchizedek of Shalem brings out bread and wine. Right? So Sodom, we know about them. Does he bring anything out with him? No, he does not. Because we know about those people in Sodom. But Melchizedek of Shalem brings bread and wine. He is a priest of whom?
God Most High.
El Elyon. Who's El? Who's El?
God.
What God?
A God.
A God. It's not just a God. Who's El?
The Egyptian God.
Nope. The head of the Canaanite pantheon is El. Really? El is the chief god of the Canaanite pantheon. There's lots of gods in Canaan. You got boys and girls and this one and that one. El is the big one.
The Canaanites, Zeus.
The Canaanites, Zeus. Yes. Jupiter. Yes. Okay? So, I mean, that's normal. You have a pantheon, of course. Duh. Like, everybody knows that. So, you have to have somebody who's in charge of all the gods. Right? And the big god, in this case, is El in Canaan. So, it is no wonder that early Israel calls God what? El. You got to. You have to. The tree becomes a symbol of Christmas. You have to. If you want the pagans to participate in your December business that's now about Jesus, you better give them a tree or forget it. Right? They need their pagan winter holiday. You want to revalue it and call it the birth of the light, the sun? Fine. But not without a tree. Right? You can't do business without a tree. So, of course, God in early Israel is El. Of course. Or you're not going to get your pagans. Right? They're not going to convert to this crazy mono what? Yud Hey Vav what? Like that you can't see. There's no representation. Wait, what? Okay. If it's El, okay. Whatever. So, El Elyon was, we have attested in ancient Near Eastern literature, Elyon is another god. There's El and Elyon. El being big I, and Elyon, most high God. Two different gods. You worship El, you worship Most High God, you worship Astarte, you worship Ishtar, well, they're the same actually. You got it all going. Different gods do different things for you. Different regions give rise to different gods. El and Elyon attested separately in the literature of the region. They are conflated by Israel to be El Elyon, El the Most High. Elyon becomes a descriptor of El. Meaning, Yud He Vav He, right? But that evolves. That evolves in the region. Melchizedek is not a monotheist. Melchizedek is a high priest, a priest king. Often in this region, the priest was the king. The king was the high priest, which is really, if you're going to do it, the smartest way to do it. Right? If you're going to be the queen, you might as well be the high priestess. Because otherwise, you have a competing power, right? Think of who crowns the kings of Europe and queens of Europe. Who crowns them? The archbishop. The church crowns the kings and queens. What is that communicating?
They're higher. They're above.
You reign by our authority, right? And always that tension between church and monarch, From the beginning of Israelite anything, they were separate things. The priesthood far anteceding the monarchy. Are we clear about that? Right? Think Mishkan, think tabernacle, right? Portable shrine. The priesthood antecedes the monarchy. But they are separate things. Not so in Canaan. So your priest king, Melchizedek, comes out, and we have this attestation. We think, if you look at the literature of the region, you get this Melech Tzedek business, right? What's Melech?
King.
What's Tzedek?
Righteous.
Ha! Yes. So, why would somebody want to be called righteous king? What does that mean? Who cares if you're righteous, you're king? If you're the king and the priest, who cares if you're tzedek? What else could it mean?
Just.
You're just. So you have a reputation as being righteous, as being just. Okay. Maybe. What else could this mean?
It's a combination of the priesthood and the kingship.
So, maybe. Don't read it as being about my character, if I'm king. Read it differently, and what does this become?
That it's just that you're king?
I am the rightful queen of this region. Right? It's not that I am just, I am righteous. It's that I am the righteous queen. Anybody want to question who should be queen? I'm the true queen of Acadia, Samaria. Okay. So possibly a designation used of kings in the region. Tzedek meaning the righteous one, the one who deserves to be king. Or is the only right king for the region. We don't know. So, in other words, it may not be a proper name. So, whatever it is the king of Shalem, and brings out wine and bread, a priest also of El Elyon, and blesses Avram. Baruch Avram le'el Elyon. Blessed be Avram to God, Elyon. Konei Shamayim Ba'aretz. Creator of heaven and earth. Attested elsewhere in the ancient Near East only as creator of the earth. Interestingly enough. Why does the Israelite version add heaven, do you think?
Because Bereshit, the beginning of Genesis, says that God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay. But if we already have that, and generally you talk about El being the one who kones the earth, why add heaven? Why change the language?
It's the gods of the heaven and the gods of the earth. Our God is creator of all creation.
So, moving away from El and Elyon, moving away from a God that is the God of the heaven and the God of the sea and the God of the earth, right? It is reinforcing monotheism. This crazy idea that one God kones Shamayim Ba'aretz. Interesting that it's put in the mouth of the king priest of El Elyon.
Isn't that also a way of saying everything?
Yes.
Like day and night?
Yes.
Left and right, I mean up and
Yes.
down. It's heaven and earth.
Yes.
Kind of means there's nothing that's not part of that.
Correct. The absolute transcendence. Margot.
How does this fit into our liturgy? Because I know there's no
Lovely. Nice, Margot. El Elyon fell into disuse. The only place we see it, already by the time of the writing of the Torah, it's not used anymore. The only place we see it is here, and we see it in the Psalms. So we see it in poetry. Liturgical use of El Elyon remains. Poetry and liturgy by its very nature tends to be conservative. Right? It's the place we use old language that has fallen into desuetude. Only really in poetry and in liturgy. Same thing's been going on for thousands of years. So El Elyon is still attested in liturgical places like the Psalms.
Wasn't it also the beginning of the Amidah? Which is
Therefore,
not trivial.
It makes it into our liturgy as well. Interesting that even by the time of Torah it's not used. But we use it every day. Right? 3 times a day. The irony of that. So this is the El Elyon that we get in the opening brachot of, yes, the Amidah.
This may be a digression, but I don't know a lot about all this. I have a question. Is it possible that the idea to unify all these different gods into one God, was that to tamp down conflict? Was that to change the nature of the way human beings felt separate? Is that, I mean, let's say that it wasn't true. Let's say that it was there was a reason.
So it's always a dangerous, I'm trained as an anthropologist, a cultural anthropologist in my undergraduate life. And it's a dangerous thing to ask why about the evolution of a culture, because. All right, but having said that, if you read Karen Armstrong, she talks about the axial age. And in the axial age, she believes, and other scholars with her, she's just one of the ones who's publicized it the most. In the axial age, there is a movement worldwide towards a conflating of all those different deities into one force, one being. We see it in Egypt. Where do we see it in Egypt? Do you remember this? Akhenaten, the pharaoh who wants one God. That the sun god becomes the one supreme deity. And he is drummed out of town. All of his statues are desecrated. Why? Because the priest would be out of work. Where's the priest of Isis supposed to go? If there's only one God, it is not popular with the functionaries of those temples to the other gods and goddesses. Right? Very bad for business. So Athena, who's going to serve the Vestal Virgins? What are they going to do if there's only, what's his face? Zeus. All right. So there is a movement within all societies, she suggests, towards this idea of all of those gods becoming one. And we then see that expression in lots of different places. Early Israel is one of them, but that it's happening everywhere. So that's one theory, is that kind of humanity, I'm careful when I use the word evolves. Like I don't want to put a judgment on that, but it seems that humanity, if you go with Karen Armstrong, was ready to think about things a little differently, and you see it popping up in lots of different places. And when I say the same time, we're talking, when you're looking at spans of thousands of years, the same time can be within 500, 1,000 years of each other.
I was just going to ask about, does she identify the axial age chronologically?
Yes, here.
No, Karen Armstrong.
Yes, here.
So
yes, this is the axial age.
So when was that?
We don't know when that is, though.
When?
Oh, when is that happening? The 2nd millennium BCE. 3rd millennium BCE. 3,000 to 2,000 years before the year 0. She believed, curiously, I love her thinking. She's amazing. And I too digress for just a second, because she believes we are at another axial age. And I hope she's right. So because when you look at Isis and the Islamic State. We look at the world and we freak out. I freak out when I look at the news, and go, what is happening? Right-wing fundamentalist Christianity going crazy, it's like hating gay people. It's like, what? Haven't we evolved past all this craziness? And she and Bishop John Shelby Spong, people like that, believe these are the death throes of a system that is on its way out, that on some level we know that. Humanity knows that, and there is the death throes, the last-ditch, desperate attempt to prevent this from happening is happening right now. That allows me to sleep better, right? So, which is why I share it with you, is that I hope she's right.
Moving toward what?
Being more enlightened,
Sort of
a
non-strict constructionist age of...
Correct.
Or maybe
of a non-hating God.
Putting this away, any God.
Women being educated. Imagine. Women being empowered. Gay people being allowed to love whoever they want. Gender not being binary anymore. That we are moving towards getting it, and we are seeing the very panicked and violent pushback. And that we are ready for it's coming. And so I choose to believe it, because otherwise it's a little too scary to contemplate the news. So thank you for that digression. So Avram is offered, right, by Melchizedek. He pays Melchizedek a tenth. It is customary to tithe your winnings and share it with some of the other allied kings involved. So this is not unusual that Avram would have given of the spoils to this king. The interesting part is the king of Sodom says to Avram, give me the people and you take the possessions. I'm just interested in the human capital. You take all the stuff. You want it, fair and square. Give me my human capital. You take the rest. What does Avram say?
Not a thread or a sandal strap. I think that's so terrific because it's so simple and plain, and everybody has a sandal strap and a thread.
At home.
He's not going to touch it because he's not interested in the spoils of war.
He's not interested in the spoils of war. Notice the subtlety of what he says, right? He says, I harimoti yadi, I lift up my hand, el yud he vav he, el elyon. You hear it? I lift up my hand, meaning I swear by whom? Yud he vav he, el elyon. Verse 22, creator of heaven and earth. So he is subtly communicating, David, yes, we're not going to argue El Elyon, okay, right?
It just seems that Adonai in that.
But we're adding Yud He Vav He. So the reader knows that Avram knows and is saying it out loud. Does Melchizedek know what the heck Yud He Vav He? Who knows? He hears El Elyon. He knows that God, right? So everybody has their own gods. It's not going to upset Melchizedek that you worship Baal and you worship Ashtarte and I worship El Elyon. Fine, we all have our... But Avram calls Yud He Vav He El Elyon. Okay. So it's... But we know that that's important that it says Yud He Vav He. We know, as the Israelite reader, that's critical. Sarah?
In an age now where the Holocaust art is still being litigated and hung on to, you think, this was thousands and thousands of years ago, and this man would not take from people that he had conquered.
So it's, yes, so he is very different, right, from the Nazi mindset, to plunder. And it goes further. He's saying no to reparations. I don't want your BMW. Keep your BMW. right? I'm not interested, and I made it on my own just fine in the Golden in Medina. I don't need your German cars, right? So he's saying, I am not in this for the money. I am not interested in the spoils. Then what did he do it for?
His kinsman back.
This is about the importance of redeeming the captive. This is about risking his own life to redeem his nephew. And it's made explicitly clear. It could not be clearer. Not a thread, not a sandal strap. In case it wasn't clear, is he interested in? He's interested in only the life of his family member. But everyone else should take. There's nothing wrong with taking. He makes it very clear also. But everyone else should take their share. There's nothing wrong with having a nice life and a nice house. Depends who you take it from, right? So it depends how you come by it.
So were these possessions not only Lot's possessions that he got back, but also the possessions of the former captors?
Heck yeah.
All their stuff.
Heck yeah. Big time.
Interesting that, though, he did it. He said he doesn't want a sandal strap of what is yours. He's the one who got all this stuff.
So what is he saying? In addition to, I'm not in this for the money, what else is he saying? Good reading.
Well, I mean, it seems like it's...
Who's he talking to?
He's talking to the king.
Of who? Of what?
Sodom.
Those wicked sinners.
Oh.
So what's he saying? Not only am I not interested, making clear I'm not interested in doing this for the money, but also...
This is your stuff, though. But that's why he didn't go out.
I don't want anything of yours.
But these are... It sounds as though he went out representing the king of Sodom and took this stuff back for Sodom.
They're on the same side. They're allies.
Okay, because that was not clear.
They're allies.
To get Lot on his own.
5 kings versus 4 kings. And so he's now allied with these guys. And he's making it, but it's very clear. Torah's making it very clear that Avram wants nothing to do with Sodomite anything. Very clear.
They were on the same
No
side.
Sodomite anything, because they are wicked, evil sinners. And we're going to see how wicked and how evil they are, that they do not protect who?
People coming into their town.
A guest.
Lot.
A guest.
No, a guest. A stranger.
Let's be clear. This has nothing to do with homosexuality. It could not be clearer. What proves how vile and awful they are is they do not offer to protect a guest in their house. That is the main number one assumption of the ancient world, is you are safe in your host's house. Your host is supposed to put his own life on the line. It is still this way. In a Bedouin, you go to the Bedouin communities, you sit in their tent, they will die defending you. And they offer up their guest to the mob. This is the proof of how depraved the city is. All right. And that text, of course, is mangled and
also
misused.
And I just wanted to say what's so interesting about the ethics of, tainted money, where the money comes from, whether, if it's given, is money donated to a cause? Are you able to take it if it comes from, someone that's got it out of, bad way, or, or the person is evil, or, how we switched from the Beverly Hills Hotel to the other because that association was with the sheep.
Brunei.
Yeah, and everything.
Whoever it was. The Sultan of Brunei.
So it's just interesting.
The wicked and evil Sultan of Brunei, right?
But
So one thing I just want to add to that, yes, I think that question is being raised. I think Avram is making a statement, or at least scholars are reading a statement into it. The only thing I want to add is that he's already wealthy. So yes, he's doing the right thing. Yes, he doesn't want tainted money, and he's wealthy enough to be able to decline it. Right? If he were starving if he were a mercenary, I don't know. But I mean, we're not given that situation. But
okay for his people to take it.
Go ahead.
It raises issues, I think, in terms of modern war and who your allies are, and what motivations do you have to go after the same goal, and how do you evaluate who you're working with? It's not clear, and in this we would say that's okay. You can ally with Qatar on this thing, even though you think they're horrible in this other thing. It's
a reality, right? It's the political reality. The enemy of my enemy is my erstwhile ally.
Yeah, or things are, it depends. It's basically things. It depends. Well, I want to go get Lot. I want to go save my nephew. So we can be on the same side right now.
Right. Yes.
I don't know. I think that's the oil.
So this ends this episode, right, in the life of Avram. This that scholars believe, is here in order to fill out the picture of who he is. He is accomplished at war. He is a conquering hero. He is respected in the region. He's a sheikh in the region. And he's righteous, right? He puts his own life at risk for Lot, who hasn't exactly turned out to be the greatest of relations, and who owes Avram a lot. And Avram risks his life to do the right thing and declines any of the booty, to make it very clear that he's not on the take. He's not interested in material wealth in the sense of war. So probably that's why we have this here. And now we're going to get chapter 15. The scholars, as far as I have read and learned, this stuff of chapter 14 likely was taken by the biblical author wholesale from another source, right? So it takes the whole source wholesale and drops it here. This is why we get these names and this, that it comes intact from another source. It's its own document. Chapter 14, that whole business that we just did, is its own document within the story of the patriarch Avram. So probably taken from another Avram tradition, and just kind of cut and lifted and put right here.
Well, up to this point, you really didn't have any clue that he was a warrior.
Right.
So, assuming that there was a reason for wanting to make him a warrior, what is the reason?
What is the reason, Reuben asks, that the author would be interested in having the reader know that Avram is an accomplished warrior? Sarah? Respect.
In the old world, General MacArthur or
Liam Neeson movie, and that's what it makes me think. I'm going to go get my nephew, and
Rambo. So there seems to be universally an amount of respect, fear, whatever that comes with the warrior.
But he's a righteous warrior.
He's a righteous warrior.
This is a very different Avram than the one I'm accustomed to on Rosh Hashanah, who says, God, kill your son. Okay, I'm coming. This is like a change of character here.
It's very interesting that we don't generally incorporate this into our understanding of who he is. I think it's true.
Well, there had to be some reason why God came to him in a vision. I mean, why? Why him?
Why Avram?
Yeah.
Because he's the patriarch.
Well, but I'm just saying, it seems like this chapter we just read sort of was inserted there to motivate. Why him?
Yeah. So that he's deserving.
Yeah.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Right. Because this is the story of our patriarch. So he has to be.
There had to be a reason.
He's got to be a great guy.
Just picked him out, just threw the dart, the thing of the dart at the wall.
And it is also why Sarai is so beautiful. right? That he's afraid she's going to be taken, and she is taken, and twice, into Pharaoh's harem. She's so beautiful because she's the matriarch. The matriarch has to be beautiful. Why?
Good story.
Well, it's a good story, but why in the ancient world does she have to be beautiful?
Shows that she's favored.
It is a sign of divine favor. So of course the matriarch has to be gorgeous and has to have a miraculous fertility. It can't be regular fertility. Pitom. Regular, right? She doesn't get pregnant at 23. Who cares about that? She's the matriarch. She has a miraculous fertility. Right? So Avram, if you're going to be the patriarch, you better be a warrior, and you better be good at it, and you better be righteous. And if you're going to be the matriarch, you got to be beautiful, and you got to have some kind of miraculous fertility thing going on.
And he has to be powerful. He has to have.
Yeah, of course. So Avram, we get this, if you really look closely, if you read the scholars who do look really closely at this development of this character, Avram, what we see is he gets a promise, and then it almost goes away. He gets a promise, and then he has to put his life at risk. How am I going to be the father of a great nation if I'm dead? Right? And then he gets a promise here, and then his wife is barren. And she's approaching 90, whatever, right? So there's this tension set up throughout the patriarchal narrative of a promise by God, and then, but maybe not. A promise, maybe not. And so it sets up this real tension. And Avram is told in just a minute by God, fear not, right? So it's not just kind of this, okay, you're chosen, and now here you go. It's much more dynamic than that.
When you say it's more dynamic, I'm just thinking of this. Is it obedience, or is it look within yourself and make the moral decision at this stage?
Or? Really? Or?
But what is it? It seems like it's obedience.
It's all of it. Are you kidding? This is Avram. It is faith in the face of desperate fear that it's not going to happen. And the reason I point out the dynamism is because it looks too much on Rosh Hashanah. It's too simple. We only read Rosh Hashanah, the binding of Isaac. And I think what we lose is the Avram that's afraid. The Avram that thinks it's not going to happen. And we lose that with the kind of, it looks like blind faith. Bring your son, kill him, okay. Right? You know, and that's what too often we're left with this whitewashed stereotype that misses the very rich Torah picture of an Avram like the rest of us, that's why it's here, that's why we keep reading it anyway, who, okay, I trust, it's all going, I think it's going to happen, and then we're like, maybe not. We struggle, and we're afraid, and we think it's going to be okay, and then we don't trust, and then something happens, and then it's complicated, and then we risk, and then can I risk? I don't know. Right? And is it worth it? Do I live in a trustworthy universe or not? These are the biggest questions we ask. Is the universe good or not? You know what I mean? Do I live in a loving universe that's holding me at all times? Or is life a crapshoot? And I could be run over, God forbid, tomorrow. That's terrifying. And so we miss some of that when we just listen at Rosh Hashanah to, okay. All right, so we're going to get chapter 15. Somebody read.
Sometime later, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. He said, "Fear not, Abram. I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great." But Abram said, "O Lord God, what can you give me, seeing that I shall die childless, and the one in charge of my household is Damasek Eliezer?" Abram said further, "Since you have granted me no offspring, my steward will be my heir." The word of the Lord came to him in reply, that one shall not be your heir, none but your very own issue shall be your heir. He took him outside and said, "Look toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to count them." And he added, "So shall your offspring be." And because he put his trust in the Lord, he reckoned it to his merit.
Okay. So, right? What does that mean?
Me, so you're good.
Avram's act of faith makes him worthy of it being fulfilled, is kind of the sense of the Hebrew.
I'm in so much trouble.
Right. So for the Hasidic masters, for the mystical tradition, it's exactly about that. It's about pointing to this as the paradigmatic choice to trust. Because it seems ridiculous, right? If you just take the proof, the evidence, it's absurd to think he's going to have an heir. It's absurd. And yet, he trusts. He has some kind of faith that God will fulfill what God has shown him to be his future. This, for the rabbis, is the point. That we don't have a lot of good evidence. Unless and until we choose to trust, and then you can find the evidence everywhere. So Carmen's nodding. Right? Yes. Right. I made a big jump.
That's where I jumped to.
If Avram looks at the evidence, if we look at the evidence in our lives, we can find reasons to fear. Because there's not a lot of proof that we live in a loving, trustworthy universe. Unless and until we make a decision to trust. And then when we make that leap of faith, you start to see evidence everywhere in your life that you in fact live in a loving universe and a God who lives into holding and supporting you at every turn. Carmen?
But that's not true in every period of history. If you look at the Holocaust era, if you look at people living in Israel right now,
you had people going into the gas
trusting.
Yeah. So I don't think that's true. I think there's a choice to be made always, regardless of the circumstances, for an enfranc to say, right now, it's dark. I do not believe this is evidence that therefore the human race has failed.
But is that good?
Ha, 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 ha.
Because some historians say that had the Jews been less trusting, they would not have waited for the uprising in Warsaw. It would have happened way before.
So I want to be very careful in my language because this is a podcast. I want to be very clear. I am not suggesting that trust meant God will save us from this. It means that this is a dark period. These are circumstances that should never exist on the planet. It does not, therefore, negate my belief that humanity is good at heart and that there is a loving God at the center of this universe. I will not see it manifest in my life because the evil I am confronting is too large. It does not mean there is not a loving center. That's what I'm saying. That some people chose to affirm, even in their, and still do, right? Every day, no matter how horrific their circumstances, they do not accept that as proof, therefore, that humanity's evil or the world, that there's no God. How could there be, right? There are people who make Avram's choice every day. Is it good? That is a whole very interesting question, Sarah. That is a very, very interesting question. And for me, I would never put myself in the position of judging somebody who's in those circumstances, right? Good, bad.
But also it fulfills a deep need for people.
But what I do think is people who trust that fully, in my experience, are happier people and are not embittered by what happens. That, to me, is a pretty darn good argument for choosing this way. You look at the Dalai Lama, somebody like that, he radiates serenity, but it's not naivete. There's a difference, right? And I want some of that. I got to tell you, I would love some of that. Bert, were you trying to say something?
Well, this is a slightly different situation, though, at least as the text, because Avram is actually supposedly talking right to God. He's not guessing. He's not feeling disconnected. He's actually having a conversation. He believes he's having a conversation with God.
So do the people who worship every single day.
No, I agree.
I'm saying there is no difference for the tradition. The tradition believes we all are talking to God and there is no doubt for them that that is a relationship and that God is listening. Right? We know, right, with the omniscient narrator that this in fact is God, and faith is all about believing that is in fact so now as well. Yes? Like when people say to me, do you believe in God? Right? It's like, no, I don't believe in God. I experience God. So for me, there is no doubt. Right? Because I'm not leaping over doubt to get to that experience. And it's a choice to see it that way as well. I also own that, right? That's a choice.
How can you not believe in something?
Thank you. Well, that's my point. That's my point. You just yes. Yeah, I knew there were hands. Blanche?
Really shaken to think that we're facing another Holocaust from the Middle East. And what do? We've been talking about it. But it's hitting me in the eyes.
It's a very frightening thing. And I think, given our history, we're not going to sit around and underestimate the danger, I hope. I hope that is something our recent history has taught us, like Sarah was saying earlier, is that we need to get on this now. Building the relationships and the allies and the whatever needs to happen in order to respond to what is a very, very scary set of realities.
Karen Armstrong is right.
Let's hope she's right, Ruben. I'm with you 100%. Pam?
I was going to say that Abram is told, I'm going to make you a great nation. But he doesn't have the rest of the story yet. So we find out at last Parashat that Abraham has a few brothers, and one of the brothers died, and that Lot is his nephew. So when he goes out, he takes a lot of people with him, as we see. And Lot, he doesn't know how this great nation is going to come about. Maybe it's going to be through his nephew. Maybe it's going to be, he asks, is it going to be from one of my servants? And so here he's asking twice. He's saying, Veyomer Avram. And I see this as kind of there's a pause there. He's saying, he's talking to God, I'm childless, and he's waiting for an answer, and I just hear a lot of silence. So again, he speaks the same thing. Veyomer Avram. He says the same word, even though here it's saying he added further. No, he's using the same language. After no response, is it going to be my servant? Give me something here. So I think that's part of why he took Lot, whose character is very questionable, to say the least.
And
because he doesn't know how am I going to be a great nation?
And then is willing to part with him.
Yeah.
I mean, so we also, I think, read right over the deep sadness of if I don't have a child and my nephew is the only shot I have, and then he's a jerk, right? We even missed the poignancy for Avram of now he's broken up with Lot, and that's really hard, right? So now it's going to be the head of my household, my servant is going to be like, really?
Yeah, how's this happening?
Really? And we don't have the story. We don't have the whole story.
Well,
right? I think it's a really important point that you raise, is that when we choose trust, when we choose faith, we don't have any clue of the story, how that's going to unfold. All we know is we are called into the next step, right? The next thing. We have no idea. Did you have any idea you'd be walking around right now? No, you did not. But you took the next step. We are called just to do what we know, what we believe is the next thing, and it is none of our business, and I mean that in a good way, it is none of our business how it's going to happen and how it's going to unfold. Once we are truly in that place of trust.
But if he's responsible that he had a son with Hagar.
That's later. We're not going there today.
Rabbi, if you don't know how it's going to happen,
Yeah?
If you don't know how the nation is going to happen, then, and if you trust that it is, then it calls you into very high ethical behavior with everyone you come in contact with, because it could be this way, it could be that way, it could be your servant's son, it could be Lot. So you have to be righteous 100% of the time, right?
So if we stay open, that I have no idea how it's going to unfold, you're exactly right. Then I need to treat every encounter as the possible next opening to what's going to happen. And however I interact with you can determine, does it become the next step towards or not? We are largely in charge of, are we helping to open it up or are we shutting it down?
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.